I'm Mike Alcoholic. Tradition 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. Read from 12 and 12, page 157 to the end. Years ago, this principle of no endorsement was put to a vital test. Toward outside agencies dealing with alcoholism, the AA policy is cooperation but not affiliation. A group cooperates, for example, by welcoming referrals from clinics or by sponsoring AA groups in institutions. But in one area, money for a rehab was solicited at an AA meeting, implying affiliation. In another, AA was listed among beneficiaries of a United Fund drive. AA member, here we go. Sorry. AA members employed by outside agencies wear two hats, but Tradition 6 cautions any members against wearing both at once. On the job, they may be alcoholism counselors. They are not AA counselors. At meetings, they're just AAs, not alcoholism experts. Confusion still seems to occur for the people when AA group meets at the local AA club, as AA does not have clubs. We have groups holding meetings at clubs who pay rent to those clubs for use of the facilities, but as separate from the club as the group down the street meeting at the church. For good reason too, as I have seen the internal struggles of clubs, like lawsuits threaten to tear the club apart. The unaffiliated AA group has the freedom to easily dislocate and relocate itself somewhere else, ensuring the group's continued survival. The danger of endorsement and affiliation, real or implied, has application when helping to get a meeting started within a facility or on a base. Caution has been exercised in naming and registering the group so that it remains an obviously distinct and separate entity. The problem with Alcoholics Anonymous becoming a major player in the legislation game in hospital management and educating the public and trying to resolve employer-employee disputes is that some sort of profit must be made. As soon as that happens, you are in competition with somebody, and pretty soon after that, confusion. The final component of the sixth tradition that must be considered is the need to remain focused on our primary purpose. This purpose was already outlined in Tradition 5, to spread the message to those who are still suffering. The concern of the sixth tradition is that groups who look outward toward our other organizations rather than inward toward the experience of its members may risk sending the wrong message. Tradition 6 is pretty simple. I feel safe in summing it up by saying the AA name should never be associated to anything except Alcoholics Anonymous, and that AA should forever remain poor. AA needs a little money to pay for a place to hold our meetings. We need a little money to pay for Zoom. AA does not run treatment centers, clubhouses, halfway houses, etc. Members of AA may own or operate such facilities, but the facilities have absolutely no affiliation with Alcoholics Anonymous. Tradition 6 checklist. 1. Should my fellow group members and I go out and raise money to endow several AA beds in our local hospital? 2. Is it good for a group to lease a small building? 3. Are all the officers and members of our local club for AAs familiar with guidelines on clubs, which is available free from GSO? 4. Should the secretary of our group serve on the mayor's advisory committee on alcoholism? 5. Some alcoholics will stay around AA only if we have a TV and card room. If this is what is required to carry the message to them, should we have these facilities?
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for your service. Thank you. Okay. So Tradition 7, Shante, come on in.
Good morning, Zoo Crew. I'm Shantae. I'm an alcoholic. Tradition 7. This is a short form. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. Tradition 7, long form. The AA groups themselves ought to be fully supported by the voluntary contributions of their own members. We think that each group should soon achieve this ideal, that any public solicitation of funds using the name of Alcoholics Anonymous is highly dangerous, whether by groups, clubs, hospitals, or other outside agencies. That acceptance of large gifts from any source or of contributions carrying any obligation, whatever, is unwise. Then, two, we view with much concern those AA treasuries which continue beyond prudent reserves to accumulate funds for no stated AA purpose. Experience has often warned us that nothing can so surely destroy our spiritual heritage as feudal disputes over property, money, and authority. 12 and 12, page 160. Probably no AA tradition had the labor pains this one did. In early times, we were all broke. When you add to this the habitual supposition that people ought to give money to alcoholics trying to stay sober, it can be understood why we thought we deserved a pile of folding money. What great things AA would be able to do with it. But oddly enough, people who had money thought otherwise. They figured that it was high time we now, sober, paid our own way. So our fellowship stayed poor because it had to. AA's far-flung 12-step activities carrying the message to the next sufferer are the lifeblood of our AA adventure. Without this vital activity, we would soon become anemic. We would literally wither and die. Now, where do AA services, worldwide, area, local, fit into our scheme of things? Why should we provide these functions with money? The answer is simple enough. Every single AA service is designed to make more and better 12-step work possible. Whether it be a group meeting place, a central or intergroup office to arrange hospitalization or sponsorship, or the World Service Headquarters, now the General Service Office, to maintain the unity and effectiveness all over the globe. Though not costly, these services agencies are absolutely essential to our continued expansion, to our survival as a fellowship. Their costs are a collective obligation that rests squarely upon all of us. Our support of services actually amounts to the recognition on our part that AA must everywhere function in full strength, and that under our tradition of self-support, we are all going to foot the bill. Bill W., October 1967, Grapevine. Alcoholics Anonymous can thank the representatives from the Rockefeller Foundation for pointing out that AA should be self-supporting. Bill and the rest of the gang wanted to get money for hospitals, missionaries, and printing of a book telling how 40 of them had recovered from the depths of alcoholism. They were asking for a substantial sum of money, $75,000 plus. The foundation gave them $5,000 to help Dr. Bob, who was in jeopardy of losing his house because he was helping alcoholics and not practicing medicine. Reps from the foundation told Bill and the group that they thought money would ruin what they had started. Bill and the gang got money from a very few other sources to live on and help with the book project. Eventually, Alcoholics Anonymous repaid every cent that was ever given to them, and we have been self-sufficient ever since. While contributions cover each group's rent and other expenses, the seventh tradition is essential at every level of AA service. It is both a privilege and a responsibility for groups and members to ensure that not only our hosted, for groups and members to ensure that not only our hosted by John Artie, 561-201-3277. Group, but also intergroup, central office, local services, district area, and the General Service Office remaining self-supporting. This keeps AA free of outside influences that might divert us from our primary purpose: to help the alcoholic who still suffers. The amount of our contribution is secondary to the spiritual connection that unites us all around the world. Depending on how much a group will keep on deposit at a bank and what its fees are, they may want to file for tax exempt status. Each AA group must get its own individual number. There is no one number that applies to Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole, since each group is autonomous. Question: is there a limit on how much AA members can contribute to GSO? Answer: yes. There's no minimum, but there's a personal maximum of $5,000 to GSO, and contributions are tax deductible. There is no maximum for groups. Question: can people leave money to GSO in their wills? Answer: bequests in wills are acceptable only from AA members, with a maximum of $10,000 from any one person, and only on a one-time basis, not in perpetuity. Question: can a non-AA member make a memorial contribution to GSO in honor of an AA member who has passed away? Answer: though GSO deeply appreciates these offers, we return checks, whether they are in memoriam or otherwise, to all non-AAs. AA does not accept contributions from non-members. When we receive a memorial contribution at GSO, we return the check with a letter letting the individual know of our tradition of self-support. GSO explains to non-members what can be one of the most baffling aspects of our fellowship. Question: are there limits on the amount of money an AA group or an AA event can contribute to GSO? The answer is no. Question: I keep hearing about the birthday plan. What is it? Answer: the 1955 General Service Conference approved the birthday plan, under which some members of the fellowship spend $1 or $2 or more a year for each year of sobriety they have in AA. Others use a figure of $3.65, a penny a day for each year. Some give more, but the amount cannot exceed $5,000 for any year. Question: what is Gratitude Month all about? Answer: many groups have designated November as a particular time to give thanks to the AA program. In 1970, as an extension of the birthday plan, the General Service Conference recommended that area and state committees supplement regular group contributions by sponsoring a Gratitude Month. Some, if not many, come to AA at rock bottom, without a job or place to stay. Fortunately, no payment is required at AA. But as we get sober and begin to make progress in other areas of our lives, we are able to place a contribution in the basket at the meeting. Again, for many, it makes us responsible for the first time to take care of ourselves and give back to our group. We have no dues or fees for AA membership, but we are self-supporting through our own contributions. There was an old saying in AA when the hat went around, give a buck, take a buck. WHO, WHO stands for We Help Others. Tradition 7 checklist. 1, honestly now, do I do all I can do to help AA? My group, my central office, my GSO remain self-supporting. Could I put a little bit more in the basket on behalf of the new person who can't afford it yet? How generous was I when I drank in the bar room? 2, how do I or my group support our international journals of Alcoholics Anonymous, Grapevine and Lavinia? 3, if GSO runs short of funds some year, wouldn't it be okay to let the government subsidize AA groups in hospitals and prisons? 4, Is it more important for a group to get a big AA collection from a few people or a smaller collection in which more members participate? 5, is a group's treasurer's report unimportant AA business? How does the treasurer feel about it? 6, does my group have a prudent reserve? If yes, do I know what the amount is? 7, if a family member, work colleague, or close friend who is not an AA member wants to make a financial contribution to my group, should the group accept it? What if my group is short on funds? And then there's 2 PDFs. One is called the AA Group Treasurer, and then the AA Guidelines on Finances. Thank you.
Thank you, Shante. Thank you for being of service. Okay, Mary T, come on in. We have tradition 8.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very good.
Thank you. Tradition 8. Tradition 8, short form. Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. Tradition 8, long form. Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional. We define professionalism as the occupation of counseling alcoholics for fees or higher, but we may employ alcoholics where they are going to perform these services for which we might otherwise have to engage non-alcoholics. Such special services may be well recompensed, but our usual AA 12-step work is never to be paid for. Forward to first edition. We would like it understood that our alcoholic work is an avocation. We give this thing away. We don't sell Alcoholics Anonymous. Tradition 8 allows contributions to be used for support services, while the groups provide only non-professional mutual support, ensuring AA remains an unpaid non-professional organization. Anytime a newcomer reaches out for help, they will receive it free of charge. In turn, as members freely share their own experience, strength, and hope with the newcomer, they help themselves and reinforce their own recovery. Read from the bottom of page 167 to the top of 169 in the 12 and 12. Special workers may be employed to keep the AA message alive around the world through printing, communications, and other technology. This is not paying for 12-step work, but paying for the services needed to support it with literature and outreach. Members understand the difference between paying for support services, but not paying for professional counselors. Even after accepting that people doing this type of work should actually receive remuneration for it, the attitude was, okay, we'll pay you, but it won't be much. It was felt that these folks could regain some measure of virtue if they worked for AA real cheap. This attitude lasted for years, and I'm sure that there are those who still secretly believe it. The bottom line is that paid staff helps make 12-step work possible. Also, there's a difference between doing 12-step work for pay and working in the field of alcoholism and being of service in a hospital where more and more newcomers first find sobriety. All of the professional counselors that I know do their counseling job and go to AA meetings and carry the message for free at meetings, like the rest of us. Their job is not a substitute for working the AA program. At lunchtime, if they're speaking to a sponsee, they take off their professional hat and don their AA hat. When lunch is over, they put the professional hat back on. 1942, October, Clarence S. stirred up a controversy after discovering that Dr. Bob and Bill W. were receiving royalties from big book sales. Bill and Dr. Bob re-examined the problem of their finances and concluded that royalties seemed to be the only answer. Bill sought counsel from Father Edward Dowling, who suggested that Bill and Dr. Bob could certainly not accept money for 12-step work, but should accept royalties as compensation for special services. This later formed the basis for Tradition 8 and Concept 11. Both co-founders dedicated so much time to the fellowship, it was impossible for them to earn a living through their normal professions. GSO special workers. There are 74 employees of the General Service Office in New York City, with an average salary of $49,548 per year. Middle class in Manhattan is defined as $80,000 to $230,000 a year, New York Times. Tradition 8 checklist. Is my own behavior accurately described by the traditions? If not, what needs changing? When I chafe about any particular tradition, do I realize how it affects others? Do I sometimes try to get some reward, even if not money, for my personal AA efforts? Do I try to sound in AA like an expert on alcoholism, on recovery, on medicine, on sociology, on AA itself, on psychology, on spiritual matters, or heaven help me, even on humility? Do I make an effort to understand what AA employees do? What workers and other alcoholism agencies do? Can I distinguish clearly among them? In my own AA life, have I any experiences which illustrate the wisdom of this tradition? Have I paid enough attention to the book 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, to the pamphlet AA Tradition, how it developed? Thank you for letting me serve.
And thanks, Mary. Thank you for your service. Thank you. Okay, Julia. Oh, Christy, do you have a question?
No, just a share. Thank you.
We'll have shares at the end. Okay, we're going to continue on. Thank you, though.
Hey guys, Julia, alcoholic. Thanks for letting me be of service. I'm reading Tradition 9. Tradition 9 in short form. AA, as such, ought never to be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. But wait, no organization? How can this be? How do you make people do what you want them to with no way to enforce it or toe the line or stay in line? That's why we have the 12 traditions. 12 and 12, page 172. When Tradition 9 was first written, it said that Alcoholics Anonymous needs the least possible organization. In years since then, we have changed our minds about that. Today, we are able to say with assurance that Alcoholics Anonymous and AA as a whole should never be organized at all. Then, in seeming contradiction, we proceed to create a special service board and committees which in themselves are organized. How then can we have an unorganized movement which can and does create a service organization for itself? Scanning this puzzler, people say, what do they mean? No organization. 12 and 12, page 175. AA has to function, but at the same time, it must avoid those dangers of great wealth, prestige, and entrenched power, which necessarily tempt other societies. Though Tradition 9 at first seems to deal with a purely practical matter, in its actual operation, it discloses a society without organization, animated only by the spirit of service, a true fellowship. In the real world, businesses and other groups are organized. There is a hierarchy of authority established so that some members of the organization have the authority to direct the actions of others. But in 12-step groups, no one has that kind of authority. The groups are a fellowship of equals. Decisions are made by the group as a whole and not by one or a few members. Creating and maintaining the atmosphere of true fellowship, 12-step groups ensure that even the newest members can quickly gain a feeling of belonging. 12 and 12, page 174. In the beginning, our founders really felt like we didn't need much organization and structure in the fellowship. And then they went and created a bunch of it. It is clear that we ought to never name boards to govern us, but it is equally clear that we shall always need to authorize workers to serve us. It is the difference between the spirit of vested authority and the spirit of service. It is in this spirit of service that we elect the AA group's informal rotating committee, the intergroup association for the area, and the general service conferences of Alcoholics Anonymous for AA as a whole. Even our foundation, once an independent board, is today directly accountable to our fellowship. Its trustees are the caretakers and expediters of our world services. One of the best examples of this is if you should ever find yourself needing to reach out to the GSO for their ideas on a specific issue that your group, district, or area may be having, you can be relatively sure that regardless of what you are asking about will garner a response that generally starts off with something like, "That's a great question. Our shared experience in AA is this." And they will offer suggestions of solutions from those that have gone before us to help you with your concern. They cannot tell us what to do, but they can help us. The organization of our fellowship is crucial to our being able to carry the message to the still suffering alcoholic, but that structure is not there to govern us, but to serve. AA has to function, but at the same time, it must avoid those dangers of great wealth, prestige, and entrenched power, which necessarily tempt other societies. Though tradition 9 though tradition 9 at first sight seems to deal with a purely practical matter in its actual operation, it discloses a society without organization, animated only by the spirit of service, a true fellowship. You'd be correct in thinking that in AA, the inmates run the asylum. Tradition 9 checklist. 1. Am I in my group a healing, mending, integrating person, or am I divisive? What about gossip and taking other members' inventories? 2. Am I a peacemaker, or do I, with pious precludes, such as just for the sake of discussion, plunge into argument? 3. Am I gentle with those who rub me the wrong way, or am I abrasive? 4. Do I make competitive AA remarks, such as comparing one group with another or contrasting AA in one place with AA in another? 5. Do I put down some AA activities as if I were superior for not participating in this or that aspect of AA? 6. Am I informed about AA as a whole? Do I support in every way I can, AA as a whole, or just the parts that I understand and approve of? 7. Am I as considerate of AA members as I want them to be of me? 8. Do I spout platitudes about love while indulging in secretly justifying behavior that bristles with hostility? 9. Do I go to enough AA meetings or read enough AA literature to really keep in touch? 10. Do I share with AA all of me, the bad and the good, accepting as well as giving the help of fellowship? Thanks for letting me serve.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you for being of service. Thank you. Okay, Sherry, come on in. It's tradition 10.
Hi, everybody. Sherry, alcoholic, tradition 10. Tradition 10 short form. Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues. Hence, the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. Tradition 10 long form. No AA group or member should ever, in such a way as to implicate AA, express any opinion on outside controversial issues, particularly those of politics, alcohol reform, or sectarian religion. The Alcohol Anonymous groups oppose no one. Concerning such matters, they can express no view whatever. 12 and 12, page 176 states, never since it began has Alcoholics Anonymous been divided by a major controversial issue, nor has our fellowship ever publicly taken sides on any question in an embattled world. This, however, has been no earned virtue. It could almost be said that we were born with it, for as one old timer recently declared, practically never have I heard a heated religious, political, or reform argument among AA members. So long as we don't argue these matters privately, it's a cinch we never shall publicly. This tradition is a way and expansion of tradition 5 that states AA's primary purpose. We can't carry a clear message to the alcoholic who still suffers if AA is commenting on all sorts of other topics that are completely unrelated to this primary purpose. This means that AA will never have an opinion on politics, the question of whether marijuana should be legalized, or conflicts going on around the world. Furthermore, no member of AA should express an opinion on what the short form of the tradition calls outside issues in a way that suggests his or her opinion represents AA itself. The 10 tradition is rather clear as it applies to AA. We have prospered by having no opinion on outside matters and not being drawn into controversy. For instance, AA has avoided the outside issues that tore apart the Washingtonians. AA has never become crusaders or taken stands on important but outside issues, particularly those of politics, alcohol reform, or sectarian religion. Bill Wilson differentiates the responsibilities of AA member and the AA group in this tradition by saying on page 177 of the 12 and 12 that the 10 tradition does not mean that the members of Alcoholics Anonymous, now restored as citizens of the world, are going to back away from their individual responsibilities to act as they see it, as they see the right upon issues of our time. But when it comes to AA as a whole, that's quite a different matter. In this respect, we do not enter into public controversy because we know that our society will perish if it does. A chuckle on the inside when I hear an AA member respond, "That's an outside issue. I have no opinion on it." That is so egotistical because that implies the person is speaking on behalf of AA. I can have an opinion on anything. I choose because of the fact that I don't speak for AA. As a private citizen not identified as an AA member, I am, of course, free to act as I choose on those subjects, just as any other person is. Instead of limiting my freedom, this tradition gives me complete liberty outside the fellowship and frees me to concentrate on recovery alone while I'm in the AA circles. Bill Wilson was very religious and contemplated converting Catholicism, but decided against it because he realized that if he did it, many others would follow his lead, and he didn't want to appear to endorse any one religion. Alcoholics Anonymous was in the habit of suing to enforce its copyright of the Big Book, other AA literature, and the AA logo. We all know that in the early 1990s, AAWS decided to begin eliminating the use of the circle and triangle symbol on its literature, letterhead, and other material. It has become too costly and too controversial for AA to try to continue to defend its right up to this symbol. Although it's no longer our official logo, it is still associated with AA. Did you also know that we no longer hold the copyright to the first and second editions of the Big Book in the United States? The third and fourth editions remain copyright protected worldwide, including the United States. Given that the internet is a worldwide medium, permission must be requested from AAWS for all internet postings of all editions of the Big Book, Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a fact. AA has not been involved in one controversy and has been in existence for over 86 years. Because of this tradition, it is very rare to hear people in AA meetings argue about those issues that plague Thanksgiving dinners everywhere: politics, religion, and reform of any kind. Local AA publications are permitted to reprint the steps, traditions, and/or the concepts and quote a phrase, sentence, or brief paragraph excerpted from AA literature, such as the Big Book, Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, the AA Service Manual, and conference-approved pamphlets without prior written request to do so. When this occurs, the proper credit line should be included to ensure that the copyright of AA literature are protected. After a quotation from a book or pamphlet, the credit line should read, reprinted from, name of the publication, page number, with permission from AA World Services Incorporated. What is the copyright status of the Big Book? The first and second edition of the Big Book, Alcoholics Anonymous, are in the public domain in the United States only. The third and fourth edition remain copyright protected worldwide, including the United States. Given that the internet is a worldwide medium, permission must be requested from AAWS for all internet postings of all editions of Big Book, the Big Book, Alcoholics Anonymous. Where can I find information regarding the use of AA trademarks? On the AA website, www.aa.org, in the section entitled Intellectual Property Policies, and in the AA Service Manual under the section entitled Trademarks, Logos, and Copyrights. Alcoholics Anonymous holds the copyright on the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. You will need first to secure permission in writing from AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, P.O. Box 545 459 Grand Central Station, New York, New York, 10163 to use the steps or traditions. The tradition 10 checklist. Do I ever give the impression that there really is an AA opinion on doctors, psychiatrists, churches, hospitals, jails, or alcohol? Prescribed medications, other drugs, other 12-step programs, vitamins, and Al-Anon, the federal or state government. 2, can I honestly share my own personal experience concerning any of those without giving the impression that I am stating the AA opinion? 3, what in AA history gave rise to our 10th tradition? 4, what would AA be without this tradition? Where would I be? 5, do I breach this or any of the supporting traditions in subtle, perhaps unconscious ways? 6, how can I manifest the spirit of this tradition in my personal life outside of AA and inside of AA? 7, should the meeting secretary intervene to remind AA members about this tradition if a member starts criticizing one political party compared to others or favoring a religion over others? And then you have the website here for the AA World Services. Thanks for letting me read.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you for being of service. Thank you. Okay, Stavian, tradition 11.
Stavian, grateful recovering alcoholic. Thank you for letting me be of service. Tradition 11, short form. Our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. Long form. Our relations with the general public should be characterized by personal anonymity. We think AA ought to avoid sensational advertising. Our names and pictures as AA members ought to never be broadcast, filmed, or publicly printed. Our public relations should be guided by the principle of attraction rather than promotion. There is never need to praise ourselves. We feel it better to let our friends recommend us. 12 and 12, page 180. Let's see how these two contrasting ideas, attraction and promotion, work. Out. A political party wishes to win an election, so it advertises the virtues of its leadership to draw votes. A worthy charity wants to raise money. Forthwith, its letterhead shows the name of every distinguished person whose support can be obtained. Much of the political, economic, and religious life of the world is dependent upon publicized leadership. People who symbolize causes and ideals fill a deep human need. We of AA do not question that, but we do have to soberly face the fact that being in the public eye is hazardous, especially for us. By temperament, nearly every one of us had been an irresponsible promoter, and the prospect of a society composed almost entirely of promoters was frightening. Considering this explosive factor, we knew we had to exercise self-restraint. The way this restraint paid off was startling. It resulted in more favorable publicity of Alcoholics Anonymous than could possibly have been attained through all the arts and abilities of AA's best press agents. Obviously, AA had to be publicized somehow, so we resorted to the idea that it would be far better to let our friends do this for us. Precisely that has happened, to an unbelievable extent. Veteran newsmen, trained doubters that they are, have gone all out to carry AA's message. To them, we are something more than the source of good stories. On almost every news front, the men and women of the press have attached themselves to us as friends. Full disclosure, it was the public service announcement on the radio when I lived in New York that saved my life. That's when I heard about Alcoholics Anonymous. Promotion allows outsiders to change the message so much so that members may start to hear a different message in the AA meetings. The original message of "we get better" has become "things get better." Outside institutions say that it does not matter which 12-step program you go to, they are all the same. Yet the support a drug addict would get at an AA meeting from alcoholics may not be the same as he would get at a Narcotics Anonymous meeting with other addicts. Another falsehood one might hear in an AA meeting is a drug is a drug is a drug. That is not true. Alcohol is a drug, but it is not the same as narcotics that are shot into the vein or snorted. There may be other ways of getting it in the system I'm not familiar with. Our appearance, how we communicate, dress, and conduct ourselves in and out of the rooms of AA, that's part of carrying the message also. to let people see the difference that this design for a living we were given has worked in our life. When people see the changes in our life, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, they may be attracted. They need no promotion. This is a program for people who want it. Tradition 11 checklist. Number 1, do I sometimes promote AA so fanatically that I make it seem unattractive? 2, am I always careful to keep the confidences reposed in me as an AA member? 3, am I careful about throwing AA names around, even within the fellowship? 4, am I ashamed of being an alcoholic? 5, what would AA be like if it were not guided by the ideals in Tradition 11? Where would I be? 6, is my AA sobriety attractive enough that a sick drunk would want such a quality for himself? Back to you, Nicole.
Thank you, Stavian. Thank you for your service. Thank you. Hey, Shannon, the last tradition, Tradition 12.
Thank you, Shannon. Grateful recovering alcoholic. Tradition 12. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. Tradition long form. And finally, we at Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the principle of anonymity has an immense spiritual significance. It reminds us that we are to place principles before personalities, that we are actually to practice genuine humility. This is to the end that our great blessings may never spoil us, that we shall forever live in thankful contemplation of Him who presides over us all. This is probably the most understood of all of our AA traditions. Tradition 3 and Tradition 12 are probably the most quoted of all of the traditions, except that people tend to quote Tradition 12 out of context. Anonymity is maintained, not so much for the protection of the individual as for the protection of the program. Anonymity, as practiced in AA, is about releasing oneself from the grip of pride and ego by getting rid of the individual need to be noticed. With that freedom, the recovering alcoholic has a greater ability not only to help themselves, but to help others in need. To better understand this tradition, I think it's best to think of it like this. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place AA principles before individual personalities. People oftentimes shout out principles before personalities in various circumstances and situations. It's a great principle to apply in one's regular life. Used in this context, it could have a few meanings. 1, we should set aside any differences and get the job done. 2, let's ignore the formalities of the messenger and listen to the message. Once again, anonymity is maintained not so much for the protection of the individual as for the protection of the AA program. In his last message to AA, Bill W. talked about the spiritual and practical impact of anonymity on AA as a whole. He said, on the spiritual level, anonymity demands the greatest discipline of which we are capable. On the practical level, anonymity has brought protection for the newcomer, respect and support of the outside world, and security from those of us who use AA for sick and selfish gain. Dr. Bob said there are 2 ways to break the anonymity tradition. 1, by giving your name at a public level of press or radio. 2, by being so anonymous that you can't be reached by other drunks. I don't put my last name on the screen because of the Zoom bombers. When I give out my phone number, I give my last name and not just the last initial. There should be no anonymity within Alcoholics Anonymous and definitely not within your home group. In an article in February 1969 Grapevine, Dr. Bob on Tradition 11, Volume 25, Issue 9, DS of Dan Martello, California, wrote that Dr. Bob commented on the 11th tradition. We need always to maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films, as followed. Since our traditions of anonymity designates the exact level where the line should be held, it must be obvious to everyone who can read and understand the English language that to maintain anonymity at any other level is definitely a violation of this tradition. The AA who hides his identity from his fellow AAs by using only a given name violates the tradition as honored, posted by John Artsy, 561-201-3277. Much as the AA who permits his name to appear in the press in connection with matters pertaining to AA, the former is maintaining his anonymity above the level of press, radio, and film, and the latter is maintaining his anonymity below the level of press, radio, and film, whereas the tradition states that we should maintain our anonymity at the level of press, radio, and film. Ernie G. of Toledo, commenting that he saw to be an increase of anonymity within AA today as compared with the old days, said, I made a lead trip to bring the message over to Jackson, Michigan one night, and everybody's coming up to me and saying, I'm Joe, I'm Pete. Then one guy said, safe journey home. If you get into trouble, give me a buzz. Later, I said to the fellow who was with me, you know, suppose we get into trouble on the way home. How do we tell anyone in AA? We don't know anyone's last name. They get so doggone carried away with this anonymity, it gets to be a joke. One of the most insane things I sometimes hear in AA is when a person uses someone's full name, then declares, they're dead now, I can use their full name. That's not true at all. If the person never used their last name while they were alive, what makes someone think that they're justified in using their full name when they're dead? I don't care that they use the full name. It's justifying it by saying that they can now do it because the person is dead. 12 and 12, page 184. The spiritual substance of anonymity is sacrifice, because AA's 12 traditions repeatedly ask us to give up personal desires for the common good. We realize that the sacrificial spirit, well, symbolized by anonymity, is the foundation of them all. It is AA's proved willingness to make these sacrifices that give people their high confidences in our future. But in the beginning, anonymity was not born of confidence. It was the child of our early fears. Our first nameless group of alcoholics were secret societies. New prospects could find only us find through the trusted of friends. The bare hint of publicity, even for our work, shocked us. Though ex-drinkers, we still thought that we had to hide from the public distrust and contempt. When the big book appeared in 1939, we called it Alcoholics Anonymous. Its foreword made this revealing statement: it is important that we remain anonymous because we are too few at present to handle the overwhelming number of personal appeals which may result from this publication. Being mostly business or professional folk, we could not well carry on our occupations in such events. Between these lines, it is easy to read our fears that large numbers of incoming people might break our anonymity wide apart. You may be as anonymous within and outside of AA as you choose. However, I find it that coming into AA, many of our members used to brag about being under the influence and doing something stupid and sometimes harmful things. But now that they're in recovery and are trying to be better people, they want to keep that a secret from the outside world. Telling someone who may need our help that you're in AA is not breaking your anonymity. We have a responsibility pledge that everyone in AA should try to live by. I am responsible. When anyone anywhere tries to reach out for help, I want the hand of AA to always be there, and for that, I am responsible. But I'll say it again. You may be as anonymous inside and outside of AA as you choose. There are professional people who don't want to jeopardize their jobs or their standings in their communities by letting too many people know that they are in AA. Some of those professionals go to meetings that the rest of us don't know about because they're not posted anywhere. The bottom line is that the 11th and 12th traditions are not for the protection of the individual. They are for the protection of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they are intended for us to not give our full names and let them know that we're in AA when we talk to the press, because of the fact that we may drink again, and that would then put AA into a bad light. Tradition 12 checklist. 1. Why is it a good idea for me to place the common welfare of all AA members before individual welfare? What would happen to me if AA as a whole disappeared? 2. When I do not trust AA's current servants, who do I wish had the authority to straighten them out? 3. In my opinions of and remarks about others in AA, am I implying membership requirements other than a desire to stay sober? 4. Do I ever try to get a certain AA group to conform to my standards and not its own? 5. Have I a personal responsibility in helping an AA group fulfill its primary purpose? What is my part? 6. Does my personal behavior reflect the sixth tradition or belay it? 7. Do I do all that I can do to support AA financially? When is the last time that I anonymously gave away a Grapevine subscription? 8. Do I complain about certain AA's behavior, especially if they are paid to work for AA? Who made me so smart? 9. Do I fulfill all AA's responsibilities in such a way as to please privately even my own conscience? Really? 10. Do my utterances always reflect the 10th tradition, or do I give AA critics real ammunition? 11. Should I keep my AA membership a secret or reveal it in a private conversation when that it may help another alcoholic and therefore me? Is my brand of AA so attractive that other drunks want it? 12. What is the real importance of me among more of a million AAs? This concludes.
Thank you. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you for your service. Thank you. Okay, this does conclude our workshop on the 12 traditions. Thank you for being here and investing in your individual recovery account, IRA. If we all do our part, Alcoholics Anonymous will be around and saving lives for many generations. The message that we need to carry is that of hope. No hope, no recovery. No hope, no recovery. After the Big Book was published in 1939, people would order it, read it, follow the directions contained in the book, get sober, start their own meetings, and help others get sober. You can recover quickly in Alcoholics Anonymous by having the 12 steps become a way of life sooner than later. Page 15 of the 12 and 12. A's 12 steps are a group of principles spiritual in their nature, which if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. Think about the hope that is conveyed in the passage below. Big Book, page 164. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation that you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order, but obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Okay, so we're going to open it up for questions and answers. We're going to have 1 minute each, and it's brief and to the point. And that's going to open it up. Mike, you're okay to time? Perfect. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Nikki, come on in.
Hi, yeah, no, not a question, just sincere gratitude, really. This was just such an amazing workshop. Thank you so much, John, for putting together the script, and thank you, Nicole, for hosting. Thank you to all the readers. I learned so much from this, so much just now. I'm going to take this away, print out the questions, reflect on it. I already can see that my tradition 2, 3, and 9 needs work. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So just gratitude, really. That's all. Thank you, Nikki Alcoholic.
Thank you, Nikki. Thanks so much for being here too. And thank you for your service. Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Okay, so thank you for coming to the workshop, everyone. Let's take a moment to reflect on what we did here today, followed by the Lord's Prayer. I'm going to unmute everybody. There we go. And who wakes us up in the morning?
Father,
Our Father,
Heaven,
who art in
will be done.
Thy kingdom come,
Will be done.
thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Forgive us our
Give us this
trespasses.
day our daily
We
bread.
forgive those
Forgive us our
trespass against
trespasses,
us.
as we
Lead us
forgive
not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Lead us not into temptation,
Power and
and deliver us from evil.
Amen.
For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever.
the kingdom,
Amen.
the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Everybody.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank
Thank you
you all
guys for
so
coming
much.
to the
What a
Thank
workshop.
you
great
for
workshop.
everyone.
I got so much out of it. Thank you all so much.
Amazing. Thank you to all the readers. Thank you for everyone that read.
Yes, this was amazing.
I just